Hey everyone, and welcome to the second Wrestling IQ Academy webinar. Today's topic is practice planning, and we're going to cover not only the use of the Wrestling IQ Practice Planner component of the software, how it integrates into the iOS and Android app. We're also going to cover effective practice planning, and one thing I'm super excited to touch base on after Matt kind of walks us through the actual technical side of the use of the practice planner is how I've been using it in facility and out of facility. So two of those things, one, in facility for me means how is Daniel McCune's coach, Austin Solari, actually using this when he's running practice and Dan's not on site, or when Dan is on site and how he's getting all his other coaches to game plan moving into that practice. I think one of the major challenges that any coach or program director can attest to is the fact that if you don't have a coach that you've consistently taught with over multiple years, or a kid that came up into your program, it can be a difficult transition to make sure that technique is being shown the same, or culture and delivering coaching in a consistent manner with language has a level of consistency that's going to help the athletes excel as well as help them remember that. So I've been utilizing Wrestling IQ as a software now for my academy for going on 2 years since we've been open. And I've been using the practice planner effectively, honestly, for only 3 months. And I've been using that, as I said, to run Kinnelon Recreation as well as my academy. For example, this weekend, I put a practice plan together at my academy because I had a last minute thing pop up. And I knew that practice was going to be a great experience for every single kid, even though I wasn't there and I tightly control my coaching environment. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Matt now, and he is going to get us started on the technical side of things, give us a quick tour of the practice planning version of the software, and then I will get into the actual use of it and show some practice plans and how we deliver that in practice and train coaches on it.
Thank you, Jeff. I am going to share my screen here so you get a quick peek. So before I get into the sort of mechanical demo of the practice planner, it's probably worth getting into the history of it a little bit and why it exists, and what originally were the problems we were seeing. It sort of started two things. One, a couple high school coaches who were using Wrestling IQ a couple of years ago had asked me about practice planning and whether that was on the roadmap. And I also was volunteer coaching at a high school. And at that high school, we had a lot of volunteer coaches. We all had jobs. There was one head coach who was also not in building, but it ended up being a situation where we had a volunteer coach who would show up once a week, and then there were 5 of us. And that really put a lot of strain on planning. And in practice, what it meant was there was just a giant whiteboard in the room, and we would write it out for the whole week sort of as we went, which worked okay, but it wasn't something you could, as a coach, I wasn't entering the building feeling like I was prepared to coach. I didn't have in my mind okay, I know I'm supposed to do this before I get there, so on my drive in, I'm going to think about how I will show that move and how to show that to beginner wrestlers and advanced wrestlers and all the variations you get when you're actually effectively coaching. And so that's the genesis. And Wrestling IQ at that point had a calendar. So we started building from there. So if you're in Wrestling IQ here, there's a calendar tab. If you pop into a practice, you'll see a bunch of stuff, attendance, all this event invites. What we're looking at here is the plan. And we are going to edit this plan to show you the builder. So the basics of the builder is drag and drop. You'll notice that these blocks over here are specific to wrestling. So, I'm trying to create a planner that's easy and quick to use for wrestling coaches rather than tedious and generic. So you've got things, in this example, I have a saved block, which I'm sure Jeff will touch on a lot in practice here shortly. But I've created a game, for example. This is a little warm-up. This is a link to a YouTube video of the rules. Got a little cool down section in here. Maybe we'll add let's add some water in there. Maybe we'll do a tumbling warm up. I'm going to skim through this just so you see it in action, but you would fill out all of these details generally. I will also throw in, I guess we're going straight to live today. This is terrible planning, but I want to show you to see the blocks in action in various devices.
Actually, Andy Robat would fully support live at the beginning of practice.
There you go. I know what I'm doing, clearly. You sort of get it. You're dragging and dropping within sections. You can drag and reorder These can reorder as well. You can expand and collapse to make that editing easier. I'm going to save it. This is a quick little handy thing. So if you want to notify your coaching staff that the practice plan is ready, I find a lot of teams have a point person for the practice, and they'll click this button to tell the other coaches like, hey, you can go view this now. So we're all prepared. And when you're viewing it on the web, you'll see it all here. There is also a print function. I know and love digital first solutions, but I also know that not all wrestling rooms have great cell phone connection. So there's a print view, totally willing to use it. And the other thing that's probably worth mentioning is in the WrestlingIQ app, you are able to head on over to the calendar and you have a view only version of the practice plan. So if you're on the go, you get that notification, you can quickly run through what's going to happen. That's how the practice planner works and how you can use it. And that's probably where I'll turn it back over to Jeff so he can talk about how to effectively use it and how it actually works day to day, which I'm sure is what we're all here for.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Hey, while you're in there, can you actually go back to that mobile demo?
Sure.
Because I know we're not going to come back to that when I get into a flow a little bit. So jump on the practice plan and just show real quick how this has been the most valuable addition in the last month for me in our in-facility use. Go to the link that you had to the video speedball and just click on that so they can see how it brings it up.
There you have it.
Perfect. Okay, now remember that because this is going to be super critical to educating your, as Matt was, volunteer coaches and assistant coaches. And so we've been using this pretty effectively in our Kinelan Rec program here with 12 volunteer coaches that, again, super busy, wrestled 15 or 20 years ago. So I will get into that now. Also, to make sure that we populate questions. And so we've got a number of questions going over in the chat, several about, is there a template available to make it easier to transition from paper plans to WrestlingIQ? I'm going to touch on that. Matt can elaborate when I'm discussing what we did here. One of the questions is, do we have any resources for practice plans? Should they change as you approach the postseason? I'm going to answer all these questions more completely at the end. So just throw your questions in the parking lot. We'll get to those at the end and do a deep dive in those for about 10 minutes. So, all right. Okay, so again, welcome WrestlingIQ Academy. So here we've got our practice plan. One thing I want to talk about in the beginning is our previously used solutions, and want to make sure to, Matt, can you guys see me all right? Like if I hold up my phone, are you able to see that?
Sort of. I think we get the gist, but we're not going to get any details.
Okay, that's fine. So I'm not as tech savvy as Matt, obviously. I'm the wrestling guy. He's the tech guy. And so I am going to show a couple of the solutions that I've been using over the last several years, both when I was running Edge, where we had 7 to 8 coaches, as well as when I was doing St. Joe's regional program last year, which was a top 20 nationally ranked team. I was coaching with a friend just for one season. So some of those solutions that we were using is I would be driving to practice on the phone and talking to, Alex about what we needed and what we saw over the weekend, and we would just informally put together a practice plan and be like, yeah, this is what we want to work. This is our layout. Let's get there. Most of the time, because Alex and I know the same system, we've coached off the same system, it was pretty seamless. It wouldn't be perfect. And so what we did within that is we just created a shared note on our phone. And then within that shared note, we had our drill set, and then we had things that we wanted to work. So we have quotes that we want to lay out to the team in the top. Once you scroll down through those quotes, we always just touch base on one. I would have our attacks from different positions. And within that, we would just have a check, and I would just check that box off. And then that way I would know that that's what we've gone through. And at the end of the week, I would see the positions we'd work. If there was something we needed to work for the next week, I'd uncheck it and make sure that we got drilling in with it. Alex and I had it as a shared note. And then at the bottom, we would just put notes of what each kid needs to work. So there's an athlete's name. We'd pull this up at a tournament on the weekend, and we would put down basically what they needed to work. It worked good enough, but we didn't include our 2 other coaches, and we didn't include them. And so it created some conflict at the end of the season where they really weren't aware of everything that we've been working because they weren't in the room every day. And so we could have done a better job of communicating that. And honestly, this would have been that. So every time we updated a practice plan, they got a push notification. They could have seen what we were working, whether they were there or not, because they wanted to have oversight. And again, Alex and I were just the assistant coaches, even though we ran the practice room. And so it would have saved us a lot of challenges and headaches there. Other previously used solutions, if you've watched any of my YouTube videos, this is the famous book. And within this book are about 100 different tips and practice plans and generally systems that I created for coaching and instruction. I've got every which way that they flow together. But guess what? There's only one copy of this book, and I can take pictures of it and send it to people. But this is just not an effective way to coordinate anybody except for myself. And so then what I realized when I started coaching Kindle on Rec, and we got Kindle on Rec on Wrestling IQ this year, was the reality that we had 2 coaches that had spent a ton of time wrestling, really 3 that all kind of knew the same system of wrestling. And then we had 10 to 12 other volunteer coaches who love to help the kids. They just weren't super confident coming to practice in their technical knowledge, and some of them more so than others, but we tried to focus on each one of their strengths, right? So we had a former Green Beret. He's our strength and conditioning coach. We have a guy who's super into athleticism and jiu-jitsu. He's our you'll see in a minute, he's our beast mode, our warm-up coordinator. And so then what we did within that is we spent probably 5 to 6 hours taking our paper plans and laying out the first 3 weeks of the season. Why the first 3 weeks of the season is important is because for the last 10 years, the first 3 weeks of competitive season, no matter the level, I do the same thing. And I learned this from Ernie Monaco. Joe Fabian and I had a call with him, and Ernie said, Jeff, these kids, they were college kids at the time, they know how to wrestle. He goes, you just got to tighten up their defense. And I think the same thing is absolutely true when you extrapolate it down into a youth level, and even for a first day wrestler, right? If a kid can sprawl and defend an attack and get to short offense, they have the ability to score when they're not putting themselves at high risk by going underneath and attacking the leg and getting sprawled on themselves. So our first 3 weeks are the exact same. So what we did was we pulled it out of this. We went into the practice planner, as I'm going to do now. And I'm just going to go back to those first 3 weeks of practice. And this is the excellent thing as well. So, Alex and I from last year, we can't go and see exactly what we did on every day. We just have an idea of what we worked in a week, and we don't have a record. We have a record of what we worked throughout the season, but not what we did every day. So now we can literally go back and you can see when we started using the practice planner. So this was probably our first or second practice using the practice planner. Yeah, so nothing there. So we first went in and we just did announcements, main rules for the kids, right? Boring stuff that I'm not going to dive into too much. But then we worked on creating bottom system. Then we started to integrate our warm-up, where the kids are building skills there, and then including that into our athletic development, which we call beast mode. Thanks to Jameson Spooner. Again, it's just a fun way to kind of name all of the athletic movements that a lot of wrestling coaches do. And then we went into technique, right? Our top positioning. And then we have 3 different groups with about 60 kids at this point. We started the season with about 45 and we've grown to 60. And so now splitting our coaches up, I just lay out what coaches with what group so they know what they're working. And then we have games, the conditioning with the former Green Beret, and then our announcements to wrap it up. So why this is important, I'm not going to get into the details of every practice, but I am going to show you that we saved our practice plans. And so right now, there is not the ability to save an entire practice. You save it in blocks. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a second and how we've been using it actually to make our practices in probably less than 5 minutes. Like literally, we're making practices at this point in less than 5 minutes, and in the first week, we spent 5 hours just building blocks and saving blocks and making sure that we were taking the stuff that's on paper, like you asked, Dan, and putting it into our system. And so here's our first 3 practices from that week. And so we have this record for next year. We also had the ability early on, before all our coaches were on, we were just getting a link, copying it, and then sharing it to the coaches via group message. So now next year, every year, we can go back, and if I'm coaching the program or Colin's coaching the program or Mason or whoever, if we're not involved, we've got week 1, week 2, week 3 practices, right? And so now they know what the first 3 weeks of practice should look like, just like Ernie, set the foundation for Joe and I years ago of what you want to focus on the first 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, why do we change? Well, guess what? First 3 weeks of December, week off. Now we compete. And so as soon as we start competing, now our practice plans need to be a little bit more dynamic. We need to make sure that we're assessing and addressing the situations that we're in competition so that we can come back and work them during the week. Again, that's why we compete, right? So the way that we do that is I've created a coaches academy. And so then within the coaches academy is screenshots, either self-recorded or screenshots of technique videos, or how we want coaches to deliver things, right? Most of these videos are short 30-second clips, no longer, just the way that we teach. There will be some longer length clips, and you'll see how I use that here. Matt or Dan or Aaron, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the middle. Okay, so let's go to Thursday's practice. So we started with beast mode, and I'm going to show you how I quickly make practices in a second. I want to talk through the use of the links first. So previously, if I wanted to train our coaches, I would have had to like draft an email or like draft a group message, copy a link, send it. Guess what? The one time I do that, it disappears all the way into the chat and it's gone. Now I literally create a saved block, and I have this technique forearm top series as a saved block. And every time I want coaches to see it, I can just drag it and drop it and put it into practice. I don't have to show them that again. So this links to the full series. The reason that I do that full series at the top is for the coaches that don't know the system as well. We want them to understand everything. Now, the 30-second video is for the coaches that are familiar, myself included, that maybe I just need a jogger of like how to teach that. Right. And so then you link to the 30-second video. It gives you the details real quick, and you're able to teach effectively. We try to highlight, this is maybe a little too wordy, but we try to highlight the key details here. Normally I try to keep those keys to 3 to 4 things. I'll get into how to teach at a different webinar, and then we highlight focus points, right? Like what are the keys, the learning objectives, if you're in education, that we want the kids to gain from this. Same thing in the cross-face cradle. Right. And so one thing that I've done intentionally is these are public YouTube links. These are private videos. So again, some of them are screen recording off of YouTube, but these are private videos that only certain people have access to. The reason I want it that way is because, again, I don't want other coaches and other programs knowing what we're doing competitively. And yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to win. So moving on, I'm going to now go save this plan, not notify, and we're actually going to create a practice for tomorrow. So tonight's practice is already done. Colin and I created this plan earlier. Okay, so creating tomorrow's practice plan, you're going to see literally how quickly we do it. So again, the big thing is saving in these blocks, right? So as I'm looking up at my screen, saving within the blocks is a total game changer, right? And at first, Colin didn't realize you could save blocks. So every day he was copy pasting. He'd go back to the practice the day before, copy paste it, copy paste it. And then I was like, whoa, what are you doing, man? Like, we got to save the blocks. Right. And so now we have saved blocks. So tomorrow, I don't want to warm up with beast mode. We do it too much. And the kids need to work down blocks. So we're going to warm up with down block game. Right. Equipment needed, line, partner, down block game from knees. Perfect. That's our first 8 minutes. Okay. It's a youth practice. So it's a 10U and 12U group. Some of them are 8U. So we're going to give them a water break afterward. Now, once we're into that, I want to make sure that we get into a good drill day, because today is going to be a hard day to drill. It's going to be noisy. It's only a 1 hour practice instead of an hour and a half. And so I'm going to go up to drilling, drill set number 1. So we only have 1 drill set right now. Every time we teach a new technique, we just go in, we edit this block. Okay. And tonight we're teaching a new technique. I'm just going to call it new technique for today. Done. I update the saved block. And now I want to make sure I update the saved block on all existing blocks in case we go back and look at a different practice. So now every time I want the kids to come in and do 2 minutes of drilling, right? And I might only choose 5 or 10 of these. I'm not going to get through, it's a 15-minute block. So to drill every single one of these would be 20 minutes. So I'm going to choose which ones I want to work. Typically, I'm choosing what I want to work from what we were bad at the weekend before, or we just haven't spent enough time drilling. Okay, now we're going to go in. So we got drill set, water. We got to do some sparring from here. I don't know if we have a sparring block created yet. So I'll just take the live block. No, that's not the one I want. Okay, live, learn, play, doubling off situations. Okay, so here's the situations that we're going to get into. Again, I won't get into the technical reasons of why we're getting into these positions at this point of the season. We can do that on another webinar. And I'm actually going to modify this block for today. I'm going to make it live, learn, play. Just updating it for today. Then I want to pull my play situations from my drill set. And I'm going to make it 20 minutes. Now I'm going to delete these. Delete these. Oh, Matt, there it is.
Hey everybody, Matt from 20 Hours Into the Future. I just wanted to let you know that if you're paying attention, Jeff just ran into an issue with the practice planner where deleting a section deleted more than he should have from the plan. We pushed up some code this morning to fix that issue so it's no longer going to affect anybody on the practice planner. Definitely a little embarrassing for that to happen on a live webinar, so apologies if you were there in person. But you know, we woke up this morning, made it a little better, fixed it up, and that's what we do every day here. So if you do run into an issue like this when you're using WrestlingIQ, or whether it's a practice planner or not, a screenshot or a little video like this is really helpful, and we will get in there and fix it and make it better. That's why we're here, and we want the tool to work well for you. So back to the webinar.
Okay, put those in. We're going to play through that for 20 minutes. Now our practice run time. Oh yeah, Matt, we got to fix that. I'm going to save this. Okay. All right, I'm going to jump out of this practice real quick. Go back in. Okay, now I want to make sure if we're doing live, learn, play, I want to make sure that we're finishing with some conditioning. Okay, 7 minutes of conditioning. We'll give them a water break before that. Okay, save, and I want to notify coaches. So now the coaches know practice is set for tomorrow. Okay, let's talk about in venue, how we're implementing this in practice. Right. So again, technical challenges of running a practice are solved because now everybody's running practice on the same technique, same page, because I'm linking to videos, right? I'm giving key descriptions of it. I'm not just throwing a practice together based on a phone call that only I can run. This allows me to create practices and not even have to be there, not even have to run the practices. So one thing that we're doing in venue is we got all of our assistant coaches as assistant coach accounts on WrestlingIQ. I go in and I make sure that when they get the notification, they're all going in and opening up their practice planner app, and they can see the practice plan for the day. I try to get it out long enough ahead of time so that they are able to review it and not be running into practice and still trying to figure out what we're doing. So I think the real value in the use of this for us has been in the ability to really have the drill set, right? Where I think I see so many programs, myself included, where we don't end up drilling, and drilling is the key, right? We're always teaching new. And so now every new thing we do, we drag it into the drill set, new thing, drag it into the drill set, drag it into the drill set. So every time I drill that, I drag that saved block of drill set over, we're able to just spend time improving on the things that we've been working, right? And nothing falls through the cracks where you do something once, and we know that once the technical knowledge is there, we need to get the resistance in, right? It needs to be sparred, played, gone live with resistance so that that technical knowledge becomes athletic skill, right? In wrestling, we call it muscle memory, but really you're building your neural pathways to have a codified response. And you want the right response, obviously. Again, we discussed linking to videos, and then we actually created tomorrow's practice plan. So let me dive into a couple of the questions and we'll go from there. So is there a template available to make transition easier from paper plans to Wrestling IQ? I kind of answered this. I'll let Matt touch base, but I think the best thing that I've seen as far as best practice is literally sitting down with my one other head coach, and we just went through and created blocks, right? And we created those blocks. We saved those blocks. That way we can drag them over and that way it's done, right? It's a lot of upfront work, but so is creating those practice plans. So to sit down and figure out a way to make them save blocks in the way that you want that save block to come across, it does take a little bit of investment in time, but you just saw how quickly we created practice for tomorrow and sent a notification to 11 other coaches. Matt, anything on that?
No, I think that's right. It's definitely a little investment there. Some coaches approach it all at once up front. Some coaches will do it as they go. It sounds like you're doing sort of a mix. So it's whatever's most efficient with your own time and works with your schedule. And just make sure you're using those saved blocks to leverage that in the future for sure.
Definitely. Do we have any resources for how your practices should change as you approach the postseason? Yeah, actually, we just finished an awesome podcast with Emma Randall on the Wrestling IQ Academy. We just launched the Business of Wrestling podcast, and Emma talks about long-term athlete development as well as periodization. And then at the bottom of that page on the blog, we link to several resources that coaches can dig in. I think the best places to learn right now, there's another podcast out there, Resilient Sports Performance. A friend of mine hosts that. His name is Trevor, and he trains with me. We study all the time together, meaning studying the relationship between wrestling and sports performance. He has his PhD in sports performance. So that's another great podcast just to understand how you want to taper off. I think there's knowledge that we need to do that, but I don't really think a lot of coaches understand what that means as far as varying intensity, varying volume meaning length of practices or amount of practices. So dig into some of those resources. Daniel, can I attach files to the practice plan blocks? Matt?
Not yet. You can link out to them like Jeff was talking. I'm very interested in that in the future of practice planning and directionally. I see Daniel has another question related to that, which is, are there any features to create data over several practices? Can you track how much kids have seen technique or drills? And part of that will be the maturing of that in the sense that when you have a saved block like that, now we can start to understand how often that particular thing has been in a practice plan, even though we don't do that yet. That's sort of the future of where it's going is, deeper features like that. And I think that's a great one that we'll add in the future. Aaron, what do you got?
So this is probably a question more for you, Matt. So I kind of have a poor man's version that I've used for years of this, practice planning. What I've done is been able to copy all of the USA Wrestling coaches curriculum off of that. I've put it in one Word document and I cut and paste off of that for my practice plans. Everything's hyperlinked. If it says, short sit, turn in, I just copy that and do it and send it to my coaches. When I've tried to mess around in Wrestling IQ with that, it does not preserve those hyperlinks. Is there a way around that, or do I just have to re-extract those hyperlinks to the videos?
Are the hyperlinks URLs like HTTPS or www in front?
Yeah, yep. So it's almost like I copied it right off the USA Wrestling website, put it into a Word program, so it's clickable. I can send it to my coaches and say, "Hey, we're doing this. Click this. Here's the reference video."
Yeah. Can you send me one of those, a reference to one of your practice plans? Send me an email to Matt at Wrestling IQ.
Yeah.
I'll take a look. It should work, and we'll get it fixed if it's not for some reason.
Yeah, I was just sitting here because, like I said, I tried it last year, and I'm just trying it while you're talking. And I'm like, the hyperlink doesn't preserve when I drop it into the details.
Yep. Sometimes Word does funny things, but we'll figure it out.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. Nice to meet you too, Aaron.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well.
Yeah, likewise. So one thing I did want to mention that Aaron made me recall, I really, really pushed all of the assistant coaches to download the app, the iOS or Android app. And then that way they can make sure to just open the practice plan right on their phones. And we already were running practices off our phones on a stopwatch on the phone and a whistle on the phone as other apps. And so just having another app. And again, at the beginning of practice, we say, I'm not texting. I'm running practice off my phone. So the kids, after 2 or 3 practices saying that, they know what you're doing. So then last question from Daniel, is there any features that created data over several practices? Oh, well, you already read that actually, Matt, didn't you? So
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. Any further questions? All right, awesome. Guys, thanks for tuning in, and reach out to myself directly if you have questions about the operational side of using practice plans in facility. That's Jeff at WrestlingIQ. And then, of course, if you have technical sides, everybody knows where to find Matt at WrestlingIQ. So thanks for tuning in to the second webinar on the Academy.
Thanks, everybody.